I lived the first 11 years of my life in Mexico, in northern Mexico, and yeah, my life was definitely a lot different than the life I get to live here now. So I grew up in somewhat of an abusive home, and both of my parents were alcoholics and drug addicts. And so my dad was involved in the whole, drug cartel stuff. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. There's all the things that are happening in northern Mexico. I had two older sisters. I was the third one in my family, and I was born to two very young couples. I think my parents were about 20 when they had me. And all of my sisters and I kind of, handled our situation very differently. Thankfully, God put two younger siblings in my life that I was able to take care of, a 3-year-old sister and a couple-month-old baby brother. And that kind of kept me distracted from getting into, all the drugs and drinking that both of my sisters got into at a very young age. And kind of the, society that I grew up in, women's role was basically just to entertain the men, and that was just part of being like a part of a cartel, I guess. And our whole neighborhood was run by one drug leader, I guess. And so both my sisters kind of got into that, into the whole drinking and drugs and stuff. And so if you think that that's what's going to bring you fulfillment in doing those things, and think that if you just can get, for girls, boys in your life and boys the other way, or by drinking and just being able to attend parties, I guess. I definitely didn't see any fulfillment in my sisters when they got into that, and if anything, it kind of did the opposite. And though for, the little bit of time that they were participating in that, they thought that they were being fulfilled and having a good time. Really, that was very temporary for them, because then once they got home, they kind of had to start all over again. And it was the same thing day after day. So between my parents, drug addictions and alcohol addictions, I eventually found myself at an orphanage when I was around, 9. And so the day that I arrived at this orphanage, it was Easter Day. And so if you can imagine, if you guys have ever been to like a Latin American church or any of that, it's pretty crazy. And obviously I had no idea what Christianity was or who this Jesus was, but I knew he was a pretty big deal at this orphanage. And really, it did not seem like an orphanage, because no one really acted like they were orphans. If anything, they acted like they had everything in this world. And that was because they all understood that, really, they understood their purpose and what they were here, or why they were put on this earth for. And that was really to further God's kingdom. And that's really what they focused at this orphanage. And so the first 8 months were pretty tough, and probably some of the loneliest months of my life. But after 8 months, it was kind of hard to ignore who Jesus was, and eventually I was able to become a Christian. And so this orphanage focused a lot on other people rather than ourselves, and we were constantly told that it wasn't about us, really, and it doesn't matter what our current circumstances are. We're still to, preach the gospel and bring others to Christ, because though material-wise we didn't really have anything, but spiritually we had everything, and we wanted other people to be able to have the same kind of joy and contentment that we had. And so there were a lot of opportunities for us at the orphanage to minister to other people. And so some of the ways that we did that, we had like pick up soccer games at the park. And if you've ever been to Mexico, as long as you have a soccer ball, you can go either out into a park or out in the streets, and you'll have a game going within like 5 minutes. So we did that most Saturdays, and basically, so we would do pickup games, and then at the very end, at least one of us had the opportunity to share our story and just give them the gospel. And we also were able to go to elderly homes, and because most of these people that were at these homes, it meant that they had been abandoned by their own families as well. And so, because culturally in Mexico, once a grandparent isn't able to take care of themselves, usually then they go and move in with their kids. And so these people had been abandoned by their families, and obviously we understood what that was like. And so we had the privilege of making them into our grandparents, and we were able to visit them at least once a week, and just to be able to continue to encourage them. And so we also were able to go to handicapped orphanages, and though we couldn't really communicate with these kids, and even though we were the ones, there to minister to them, at the end, I think I learned more from them and was blessed from them more so than me blessing them. Just to see their joy, even in their disabilities. And we were also, we got to visit other orphanages that weren't necessarily Christians. And so we, got to talk with those kids and to encourage them. And usually most things that we had to say was very well received, just because they obviously understood we were coming from the exact same position as they were. And then one of my favorite things that we got to do was these Christmas outreaches. So I was able to go on 2 of them. I was only there for 2 years. And basically every Christmas, all of us kids would get at least 2 gifts from somebody that would sponsor us at our church. And we had the option to either put both of our gifts away or just one of them, so that we would have something to give away at these outreaches. And so we usually throughout the year put some of our food away that we received from other people, and then as well as our gifts and blankets. And then we would go into the very poor neighborhoods of the city, which basically people were living in cardboard boxes basically. And so we got to go out there and hand out gifts, and really we had a pretty good understanding that every gift that we received or any food that we got was not of our own doing, and that really all of that was a gift from God. And living at this orphanage, you definitely learn to constantly depend on God and trust that He will provide for the next day. Because some days we went with one meal if we were running super low on food. And the 2 years that I spent there, God definitely used to teach me so many things. And really, the most important thing, that it didn't really matter my current circumstances and what society was telling me about my worth or anything, because the truth was that I wasn't really alone in all of this. And really, most nights that I went to bed, I didn't go to bed feeling like I was an orphan or that I had been abandoned or anything. If anything, I was most of the time able to go to bed feeling loved and valued and cared for by my Heavenly Father. And so, in all of this, if I had, been able to see the future as a little girl and knowing that this was what was ahead of me, I guess I definitely wouldn't have chosen, I wouldn't have made the same decisions or anything, and I definitely wouldn't have chosen to live this life. But I didn't. And but I want to tell you about somebody that did choose willingly, knowing what was ahead of him. And That was Jesus Christ. And he knew when he came here that he was going to be hated by his own people and even his own family, and his friends were going to betray him. And yet he still chose to come here because of his love for us. And so for me to say that my life has been somewhat unfair, really, it would be completely wrong, because there was nothing fair about what Christ had to come and do for us. And really when you realize what he has done for you, and just the how incredible his forgiveness is for us, that really makes life a lot easier to live, because then it becomes very hard to, I guess, hold anything against anyone, because you realize how much you've been forgiven. And so that was the case for me when it came to trying to forgive my own dad, who for a long time I thought didn't deserve my forgiveness, because in my mind I didn't really do anything wrong to deserve anything that he did to me. And but really when I think about it, that's exactly what my sins have done to Jesus. And I have hurt him in ways that I can't really begin to imagine. And all of our sins have put him on the cross and killed him, and yet he still chooses to forgive and love you guys. And even after you choose to receive his gift, we all continue to hurt him and to bring dishonor to him, whether it's on purpose or not. And yeah, at the end of the day, he still chooses to forgive and to love you. And really, so I hope that you realize what you guys have been created for, and that I got to live a little bit in the kind of society when men and women forget what you've been created for, when fathers forget that they're supposed to protect and love their children and take care of them, and when women forget where their value comes from, and really that it isn't based off of what men have to say or what society has to say about us. And so I hope that you realize really that you guys have been created for a purpose. And though at times it is still like difficult for me to see I guess the purpose behind like all of this pain and suffering, yet it's amazing to think that even in that, God is still able to use those sufferings and pain to just further his kingdom. And yeah, that was definitely one of the biggest lessons I learned being at the orphanage. And even though I had really nothing there and no one really around me, I guess, like no parents, to tuck me in and tell me that they loved me, God was still able to use that, and not only to bless other people, but to also just teach me so many lessons through that. And so I hope you know that you are all very loved and valued, and it really doesn't matter what society tells you. Really all that matters is what God has to say about you, and that is that you're very, very loved and so valued that he was willing to put his own son on the cross and die for you guys. And so, that God really is a good father. And thank you.